infinite complacence, people went to and fro over the earth about their little affairs, serene in the assurance of their dominion over this small, spinning fragment of solar driftwood, which by chance or design, man has inherited out of the dark mystery of time and space.
So, Brian, you got in touch and you said that you've only really shared your story amongst family and very close friends. So I don't know how specific you want to be with, where these things took place. That's always up to the guest as far as specificity of locations, but you can even say just a state if you want. But yeah, let's jump in and let's talk about what went on with you and your family.
Yeah, so the stuff, it's still so fresh in my mind, Shannon. It was 20 years ago, I think the spring actually, is when things started, and it was in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I have recently got married, and there's a lot of little things that happened up front that, I can just kind of, I could chalk them up to coincidence or, some natural law. And at the time, I would say I was agnostic at best, maybe atheist. I didn't believe in any type of afterlife, and I was, very cynical and skeptical when people talked about spirits or ghosts or things of that nature. It started off, the first incident occurred, I was in I had a condo in downtown Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I was just dating at the time, my would have been my future wife. And I was in the shower. Our son wasn't born yet. Her three sons were with their father for the weekend. So it was just two of us. It was a very small condo. But we were 20 floors up. So, there was nothing else in the condo. There was no pets or anything. And when I was showering, something felt like a hand went right around my ankle and grabbed it like a firm hand. And I looked down, I yelled at Karen at the time, my ex-wife now. And he was in the kitchen. And so, I thought, it could have been anything. Maybe I was odd, but I just talked up to some natural law. Maybe cold water hit my foot when it was hot. You just don't know. So nothing happened from that point forward. We got married. We moved into a townhouse, and we had my son Dawson, who was just a baby. And we had her three boys as well, both 50% of the time. What I call my bonus son. There were three episodes that happened at that one. Again, all could have been chalked up. Things got more intense later. But these three called minor episodes were, one morning I got up and it was roughly 5 o'clock on a Saturday. It was in the middle of the winter. I got up, went downstairs. All the stepsons, we had three-story townhouse, I'm sorry. And the boys had all the room downstairs. They built a loft. So all three of my bonus sons stayed down there with their own bathroom and had their own little walkout. And they all slept down there. We were on the third floor. I was in the middle, in the main floor, early in the morning, sitting there reading. And I had the baby monitor next to me. And Dawson was down the hallway from our master bedroom on the second floor, or third floor, I guess it would be. And he started kind of whimpering a little bit. And so I just paid attention. All of a sudden, I just heard this. It was a woman, and I ran up there and thought maybe my ex-wife was in there, but I knew I didn't hear her walk across the floor, so I didn't think it was her. But I ran in there thinking there was somebody in our townhouse, and there was nobody there, and he was back to sleep. So I picked him up and brought him downstairs. Just had a creepy feeling, and then that was nothing. I thought, well, who knows? It means somebody else's baby monitor next door, or somebody's voice. And the third instance that happened there, and when it was one evening, the boys were in the lowest level in bed, We were upstairs, my wife and I. Dawson was just down the hallway on the third floor. And we heard my youngest bonus son, we heard him crying. He was at the time that, and we heard him 7 or 8. We heard him walking up from the basement or from the first level to the main level up the third floor. We could hear him walking and crying. So, well, what's wrong with Taylor? He goes, I don't know. One of the boys had heard him. So went down, and there was nobody there. We walked down to the main floor, then down to the what we call the walkout basement floor, and they were all up in their wall asleep. Again, you're just kind of, you think about it for a few minutes, then we went to sleep. And then really nothing happened other than I had told my family the story. So when they were home, they were all down visiting one time. My mother loves stories of ghosts and spirits. We were telling everybody about this, my nieces and my sisters and my mother. And as I said it, literally the stereo came on. Everybody looked at me and said, you have a remote control. I said, I don't have the remote control. I said, I don't even know where it was, probably over on the table or by the stereo itself. And again, I was one of those, everybody was like, wow, maybe this is for real. So nothing happened after that. So I think we moved into another house for about a year, and this house would have been a haunted. It was an older house in a little eclectic part of Grand Rapids called East Grand Rapids, but nothing happened. It's just one of those houses you just kind of felt like something could have happened. And it didn't. So we ended up moving out of there and bought a house out in the country right next to her mother and her father and stepmother. They owned an alpaca ranch. And we bought a house they had bought next to them off of them. So we were probably 300 yards from their house. It was all farm. So there was nobody on either side of us for 300 yards. On the one side, which was their home and their alpaca ranch, our house sat in the middle of a hill in the middle of a field. And then there was another house probably half a mile in the other direction, but nothing behind us and nothing in front of us. We were just isolated. And while we were there, things started escalating. And again, we had forgotten all about the other stuff. We were just moving in. And one particular Friday that started it all off, my ex-wife and I the baby was, again, we had it was a ranch walk. And there was one master bedroom on the main floor with the kitchen, living room. We had a little library, TV kind of thing. And then everything else, 3 bedrooms downstairs in the bathroom. That's where the nursery was, as well as the boys, my bonus son's bedroom. The baby was downstairs, and we were upstairs at the TV room watching TV one night. And at one point while we were watching television, my hair on the back of my neck stood up, and I looked over at my wife at the time, and she looked at me and she said, something's not right. I've never had it before in my life, and I don't think I've ever had it since. And so I jumped up and I went down, and as I went down to walk in, the stairs were probably 5 foot wide. They were fairly wide stairs to go into that walkout level where the nursery was, and the nursery was right at the base of the stairs. So when I got to the top of the stairs, I looked down, and there was a man standing there, and it was typical, what you would think a scary man would be. It was he was a black. I couldn't see the features. I could just see a black full silhouette, it's completely black, and he had, I would almost describe it as an Amish style hat. And so my first reaction was there was an actual man in the house. So I went running down, and he just, that one felt very, I don't know, ominous. That one felt like it was evil. And that's why we both had that feeling. And I yelled, Karen, get down here. We went to the baby's room, picked my son up off, and he was probably 6 months, maybe probably a year. Brought him upstairs, and that was kind of the first thing that happened. And I've never seen anything in my life up there. And I was telling her, I said, this is what I saw. When we weren't drinking alcohol or anything of that nature, we were just sitting there watching TV and reading a book, probably 8 o'clock in the evening. And so we moved the crib right up to our bedroom in the main floor. We just moved everything up there, and I said, this isn't, we can't, this is not, there's something wrong here. And as we were, the next day or the 2 days later, we were kind of downstairs getting the other stuff, and I don't know, older. He was speaking. So he probably was about a year and a half old. He was saying certain words, and when we were down there, he kept pointing up the ceiling and saying, boy, boy. And what? In a certain corner of the room, he would say, boy. And he was indicating that he was seeing a boy there. So I said, this is good. Let's clear this room right out. Let's get him upstairs and have it. And then and again, this was years ago, so I don't know the exact time frame. It might have been 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later. The boys at this time, the bonus boys were with their father. So every time these things happened in the new house, this current house, the boys were always with their father, which is important because they were young, aged between 13 and 6 or 7. So there, a lot of this stuff can be chalked up to just boys playing FRAY. But so we moved Dawson up to our main room, and one night, it was a Sunday. I remember this. Dawson was in our master bedroom in the crib sleeping. Karen and I were out watching TV, and we got the lights off, and we started cleaning up the kitchen and kind of just doing what you do before you go to bed. He went in and crawled into bed, and I was walking down the hallway to go to our bedroom, the master bedroom, and at the end of the hallway, the next door was the laundry room and the garage, and there was an older woman standing there. And that one was more clear than the gentleman I had seen. I could see her features, but not crystal clear, not like a person. Like I could just see it was an older woman in a dress. That's all I could see. And again, it shocked me, but it didn't. It was like right away it dawned on me that okay, this is another one of those things. But this one didn't just disappear. It floated up in the air and kind of dissipated as it was floating up in the air. It didn't seem scary. It didn't seem a threat. But I yelled and I went and I ran in the master bedroom. So it was right there. I couldn't see it on the corner to the bedroom door, but it was right near the bedroom door. So when I told her the story, and we were sitting up, and we weren't scared, which was really odd. I've seen ghost movies and scary movies in the past. Other than that first one, it was never scary. And even to her, it wasn't scary. Had a little bit of difficulty staying there at nights alone if I had to travel, but it wasn't like it was debilitatingly scary. So this is where it gets really weird. I got in the bedroom and we were talking about this. And when we were talking, we heard the best way we could describe it. And it's kind of long story short, but my ex-wife and I split up just a few minutes after, and then I got full custody of the baby, and I raised him on my own. He'll be 20 years old this fall. So we didn't see him before. She left the family and moved out of the country, and we saw her for the first time this past summer at a wedding. And we went through the stories. We sat and talked and kind of, not rekindled, but caught up a little bit. And I don't hold any grudges against her. And we had the same story. She remembered a few that I didn't remember, so I'm not going to include those in here. I don't recall those ones. But anyway, so we talked about this one. I got in the bedroom. We were sitting there talking about what I just saw. And what we heard was the best way to describe it, Shannon, was a lion's roar in the kitchen, or the other part of the kitchen living room, were kind of one big room. And it was as loud as, I guess probably not as loud as a lion, but it was very loud. And again, we lived in the country. There's nothing around. Alpacas don't make that sound, and they were 300 yards away in their barn. And I ran out there, and when I ran out there, I would say 2/3 of our cupboards and drawers were open. That had never happened. There was no wind coming through. And they were just open. They were split open and opened up. That's when I realized there was actually something in them. You can always play off, did I see that? Was it real? Was it a hallucination? When you see the things, but when the cupboard doors and the doors were open, it's when I realized, okay, there is something physical in this home. So I was watching Oprah, or she was one day, and there was a psychic on there. And I forget the gentleman's name, but I was talking to a friend of mine in Portland, Oregon about it, and she said, I'm sorry, we weren't watching it. It was my friend Mindy who was watching it. And my friend was a psychic. He was just on, that's what it was. And he said, I have his number. So I called, went through the process a little bit, and he said, well, what I would recommend is walk through your home and yell, swear, puff, scream, get the F out of my house. This is my home, not yours. And do all these things. And so my experience, he said, that will dispel any evil. And so I did. I walked around for a few days at night. I'd go through and I'd yell, walk through primarily the lower level where I saw that more ominous figure of the man. And nothing really bad happened after that point. But it was summertime came along, and boys again were with their father one Saturday morning. We were up in the fireplace room, Karen and I, and we could see we had the baby. Dawson was, playing there with us and on the floor, and we looked out the window. And her father was lawn mowing with his riding lawnmower on his edge of the property, probably 50 yards where the fence line was, where our property met his. And he stopped and he dialed my cell phone and he called and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're just sitting here having coffee or whatever it was." And he said, "I thought the boys were with their father this weekend." And I said, "Well, they are. They're with Scott." He said, "Well, who's in the basement in the lower level?" I said, "Nobody." He said, "There's a little boy looking out the window right now, Brian, waving at me," and I'm waving. He said, "I thought it was Steve." "Well, the boys are not here." He goes, "Well, I'm literally looking at him right now. He's waving at me." And I went down there, of course. I cleaned the house or went through, cleared the house, make sure there's nobody there. And there was nobody there. So the other one was one Saturday. My daughter actually and I were talking with this yesterday because I told her I was going to be talking to you today. And she said, "Time, Dad, we got home, we pulled the car in the garage, the Durango. We got out, shut the doors, came in the house, and as soon as we went back out, and all the doors in the hatch of the Durango were open." But again, you talk it up to maybe somebody hit a button that, I don't know. I mean, back in that was 20 years ago, cars didn't have buttons that opened doors or anything at the time. You didn't have key fobs necessarily like they do now. We do now. And that was another thing that happened in that time frame. So we actually hired, or not hired, I talked to a deacon of a church. He was a client of mine, a Catholic deacon. And he came over and blessed the house one day for us and did that. And then my ex-wife and I, at the time, it was a very tumultuous relationship. Unfortunately, he had gotten into drugs and alcohol and was doing some really strange things. So we ended up obviously getting a divorce, and that's why I got full custody of my son. We were going through a marriage, and we were telling her these stories, and she said, "Well, I have a extensive background on paranormal." I had no idea. He said, "And what we have found oftentimes is that when there's a relationship between a couple that's very tumultuous and a lot of negative energy," he said, "some spirits are attracted to that energy level." It may not have been something that happened. Nobody, the house was fairly new. We were the second owners, and it was only maybe 10 years old there. My father-in-law bought the house from the people who built it. He didn't want anybody living there, but then he sold it to us. So he knew nothing had happened in that house. But he said there could have been, a farm accident 100 years ago. There could have been a car accident, 10 miles away. It's all, county roads and gravel roads. And he said, and the energy you guys brought in the locations you've had, the 2 locations you've had these experiences in, could have been caused because they're drawn to that energy. They don't know if it's negative or positive. They're just drawn to it. And as soon as we got divorced, she ended up leaving the house. I ended up giving it to her later on. But when she left the house to travel, and it was just myself and my little baby, a year and a half old son, not one thing happened at that. We haven't had an experience since. Nothing positive, nothing negative. It was just like it was just out of the home at that point.
Well, that probably says a lot if she was gone and then you guys are still there, and it was interacting with your son Dawson at one point, and then she leaves and there's nothing going on.
Right. And there was nothing. And there was one, as you've been going here, I was going to try to write these stories. I've told these stories maybe many times to family and close friends over the years, so I have them. A lot of them still remain fresh. But there was a time during the point of right before I saw the older gentleman, the one that I thought was evil, in my opinion. We went down there. I went down there to check on Dawson one night before I went to bed, and he had a blanket. And that was before we knew babies couldn't have blankets in their cribs, which we didn't know. And the blanket was wrapped around his neck, around Dawson's neck, but not the way a baby would roll and wrap it. It was wrapped fairly tightly. He could still breathe, but I don't think if I would have checked, I'm not sure if he would have been able to breathe the entire night. And it wasn't tied in a knot or anything, but it was wrapped so tightly around, and it covered his face, but just because it was just the blanket covered his face, so he could breathe through the blanket. But I don't think if I would have gone down there, it would have been a very good ending for him. I really don't. And that was an odd thing, but again, that was before anything really happened. So we were just thinking, that's weird. I mean, and it had never happened before. And of course, it did again after that because he stayed in our master bedroom, forward in the crib. But that was another thing that happened that we later on we tied to thinking, well, maybe that was something that happened at that point. Maybe there was the evil spirit, ghost, whatever we want to term it, caused that to happen. I have no idea. But that was another little incident that when you start putting these pieces together, but nothing really registered until I saw that guy. That sort of really was like, whoa. and then seeing the lady, and then the roar, and then the cupboards. And the cupboards really, that sealed everything for me. And then having another third party with my father-in-law, seeing a little boy waving, broad daylight on a Saturday morning, a beautiful Saturday morning, and seeing a little boy waving out the window at him. That was like, those 4 or 5 things right there solidify. I had the realization that there's something beyond, blood and veins and skeletal bodies that happened after we passed away. So it turned me into a believer, that's for sure.
Brian, do you feel like because the description of the man sounds like what we now term the Hat Man, right? You said the Amish style hat and all of that. Do you think that's a separate entity, or do you think that was possibly a husband or a family member of the woman that you saw, that maybe they did live there, like the Catholic deacon had mentioned, or got in a car crash and were attracted to the house for some reason? Do you think those two entities were connected?
Shannon, I've never thought of that. They certainly could be, because there was a man, a woman, and a small boy. It just seemed that I've always, in my mind, I've always thought they were separated, because one just seemed like it had evil, and like there was ill intent for it. Well, the woman seemed just benign. Like there was no, I have no justification for what I'm saying here, but I didn't feel like Stephen was really even aware that I was there. It just felt like it was just, I was looking at a recording. I've heard the term used before. I forget what it is, but it was like she wasn't even really aware that I was there. It was just looking at almost a TV screen, and then she dissipated. Where the boy seemed more engaged, like more, from what, my son was pointing to the ceiling and saying, boy or friend. I think it was boy and something else. And then my father-in-law saying he was waving. So there could have been a connection. I just never felt that, because one just felt like it was there to cause disruption, and the other one was benign, and the other one was friendly. So there were almost 3, I guess, what I sense for motivation behind the entity.
And I'm sorry, it broke up just a little bit. Did you say that the woman seemed more of a residual, or the man seemed more of a residual imprint?
No, that was the word I was looking for, residual. The woman did.
The woman,
man seemed
okay.
like he was there there was ill intent with him. He just seemed like it almost looked like, it felt like I was watching a screen, like a screen. It just didn't seem like he was even engaged. It was just a figure. And the boy seemed more like, positively engaged, trying to connect and wave.
Yeah. He was definitely active. So he was active with your son and was it your father-in-law?
Father-in-law, yeah.
Yeah. So when you saw the man at the bottom of the stairs, did he actually look at you? Did he interact? Obviously, he left. He disappeared after he saw you. But was there any other kind of an interaction there? Did his eyes flick up to you when you were at the top of the stairs?
No. It was like looking at it was completely black. It was the outline, and it was filled in. That's all it was. But you could clearly see it was a man, tall, thin, arms, legs, and then that hat was what stood out to me. I always described it as it wasn't a cowboy hat, or it wasn't a straw. It was the best, like an Amish style hat that you see quite often that the Amish will wear.
I always go back to the image of, and it's probably good that you wouldn't see a face like this because they picked a perfect person for this, but I always go back to Kane from Poltergeist, right? He had that hat on. He always wore black. He was very tall and thin. Wouldn't really want to see that gentleman standing at the bottom of my basement stairs.
Yeah, you didn't know that was his name, but I have seen Poltergeist years ago, and that's how I would describe it. It was tall. I know that. It was a taller figure. Maybe like the farmer kind of build. But thin. You can picture the woman and the boy, or the man and the boy.
So this lion's roar, I don't quite think that I have heard of anything like that. If I have, I've forgotten it. And I would love for anybody with any references to such a thing to reach out to me. But the lion's roar prior to going into the kitchen, and you said every single cupboard and drawer was pulled open, right?
It wasn't everyone. Just in recollection, I would say 2/3.
Okay.
There were some that weren't, but and they were wide open. Nothing had spilled out or anything like that. In the roar, we don't have a dog. We didn't have a dog. And we just had, not like we live in a field, so there were any bears outside or anything of that nature. I never heard it before, and I never heard it again. But the best way that my wife and I described it later on, lying in bed, was it was like a lion. And it was all in that same moment of seeing the woman, the roar, and then the drawers and cupboards being open. It was all within a 5-minute time frame.
Yeah, that is so unique to me, that whole lion's roar thing. And you're like, yeah, I don't think the alpacas make that noise. Not one of those
heard an
guys.
alpaca make a noise. And literally, Sam, they're 300 yards away, and they're in their barn. I mean, we never heard them. Never. I mean, if you're over there, you'll hear them make little grunts and things like that, but you never heard them from our home.
So going off the idea that your ex-wife maybe, she attracted some of these entities and this energy, this negative energy around her. I mean, you did say that in that first place that you mentioned where you were grabbed, your ankle was grabbed in the shower. I mean, that does make sense then, that it would be just continuing to follow you no matter where you went for the most part, right?
That's the impression we got. Even though there was one house we lived in for a year, and it might not even be a year, because we just rented a house for a little while until we could buy the house that we were buying from my father-in-law. And it might have been 9 months, and nothing happened. And again, that was the house that was older, bigger home. You would have just thought that, something was going, and we even thought something's going to happen.
Yeah, and that would have been my next. Yeah, that was my next question. Why do you think nothing happened there? But to preface that also, I'm not trying to get too personal with the ex-wife thing, but was that maybe the best time of your relationship? Was she in her best mindset and health-wise and everything? Is there any correlation there?
Well, I thought about that too, Shannon, because when I met her, my ex-wife was clean. She had just gone through a divorce where she had cleaned her life up. The townhouse, in my opinion, he still had a lot of, I'll use the term residual because we just used it referring to a spirit, kind of some residual things that were happening. Like she was just still fighting old demons, old toxic people were still trying to come around. Where I said, no, we're not letting these people in our lives. I don't allow this in your life. We're not going to allow it in the family. And it was it was a fairly peaceful time there. Other than the last 2 or 3 months, that's when I started seeing changes in her. And that's why we really expedited the move to get out to the country. We were 20 miles south out of the city, and we thought that would be a good place for us to, in my opinion, it was just get her away. We're next to her father and her stepmother. They were good, healthy people. We're away from the dysfunction of the city, where her old, tattered, toxic relationships with friends were. But at the end of that house where nothing happened, that stayed there, that's when I started seeing changes in her. And I don't know if she was going back to using drugs, but so we moved, and once we moved to the new place, things happened relatively fast.
And in relation to your father-in-law, what did he end up saying about that occurrence where he saw the little boy waving at him?
Well, he just, when I went out there and I think I walked out there and talked to him, and he said, well, after I saw it, I said, got the boys, Don, the boys aren't here. I said, they haven't been here yesterday, Saturday morning. He said, well, he just said, there was somebody waving at me. And he was fairly in tune to the things that were happening, because we would go over there every day and talk to them and have dinner or lunch or just visit them. And we were telling them the things that were happening. And he never was full, like, I believe in this, or he was never a skeptic either. He just said, well, if you guys are experiencing, I have to believe it's real. I have to believe you're telling me the truth. And I can't deny what you guys have seen, but he's never, we never really had a lot of conversation about it afterward. He just said, well, I can tell you what I saw. And this is what I saw. He didn't describe the boy that I can recall anyway. He might have at the time, and I've forgotten over many years. But I don't recall if he had any details of what he saw. He just said he saw what he could tell was a young boy, and the young boy was waving at him as he was talking to me on the telephone, one story below me. So, but we didn't have a lot of conversation afterward that I can recall. But he just shared that this is what I saw. We just talked up to another experience. And the experiences did dissipate. I mean, my son and I lived there alone for several months before we ended up saying, well, we're going to move out, and I just gave the home to her and said, we'll go on our own. And everything stopped at that moment. The day she went off to go to become a flight attendant. And of course, she used school and she was gone for quite a while. And then in the meantime, when she got back, or right before she got back with Dawson and I, we moved out. So there was never that negative energy again. And so once she was gone, it was completely benign. The house seemed like it was, back to what a house should be. And the therapist said it best. He said, it might not be drawn to you or to you. It might be drawn to the energy between the two of you. And it was very toxic. It was very negative energy. Very, very challenging relationship at that house. We split up and got divorced. But I would have to say probably the house that we didn't have any. When I really look back, the house that we didn't have any negative energy was probably our best time, other than the last couple of months of that. And I don't recall anything happening in those last couple of months. I was working on hours and things like that. So maybe that helped. I was gone a lot and at my office, things like that. So there was one other story that I forgot on the payment monitor in the townhouse we lived in. And I always remember the days of the week. This was a Friday evening, and the boys were with the father again. And this was right after we moved into the town. And we were sitting on the couch, and there was a sliding window, sliding slider going out into the courtyard of the townhouse. And it was dark out, and we were talking in the couch, kind of face to face. And at the same time, she looked behind me, and I looked at the plate glass window. And the best way we could describe it, it looked like a doily or a silk, it's a wedding veil, I would say, maybe is a better term. I saw the reflection of it, and she saw it live behind me, and I saw the reflection of it in the plate glass or in the sliding glass window, or the glass slider. And it just kind of went across the room, and it flowed across the room. It was like, you got a better eye of it than I did. I saw the reflection, and I couldn't turn and see. Did you see that? Well, I saw something in the window. And she said, it looked like a throat went across the room. And it was small, about a foot, 18 inches from what I could see. And so we sat there. That was before, the only thing that happened before that was when my foot got grabbed in the other condo. So we sat there and talked, and we're like, what was that? And I said, well, at the time here, I'm trying to be rational. I said, well, it could have been a car going by, and maybe it reflected a light so we were trying to describe it. It was clear to me that it looked like a doily or a wedding veil, how she thought of it as. So that was one thing that did happen. That was right before the hush that I heard in the beginning. Again, those are always things you can rationalize, or it could be a coincidence or some natural law, and so those little tiny things kind of added up to then the full body apparitions or whatever, and then the roar, and then the cupboards opening. The real sealed the deal for me and for her as well.
Why do you think it was always when her three sons, though, were at their dad's?
I don't know. That's a great question. It never happened. The only time that happened was when we heard what we thought was the youngest walking up the stairs crying from the 2 levels, and we could hear the footsteps. And that was the only time that anything happened while they were there. I don't know if the Durango or the power doors incident, I don't remember if they were there that time or not. My daughter was there. She was a little older. But yeah, I don't know. And maybe there were other smaller things that happened that we just talked up to, well, there are 3 boys running around the house, and maybe there were other things that I just didn't in my memory bank because I could chalk it up to them. But it does seem all the major things that happened were all when it was just the 2 of us, or the 2 of us and the baby.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder, and I hope that she's doing better, but it kind of makes you wonder, whatever she's got going on in her life now, if she has activity in her home or whoever she's with, and if they keep dragging it around. I think it was said I hate to, bring up a movie like I always do, but I think that Ed Warren's character, the guy that played Ed Warren in The Conjuring, he said it's like when you step on gum and you just take, the gum with you anywhere you go, once you're kind of marked like that. So it makes you wonder what her life is like now.
I'm a firm believer. I do believe she cleaned her life up. I do keep in touch with her family, and I saw her at a wedding this past summer. One of my bonus sons got married, He seems like he's doing really well. She lives in Bali. She's teaching school, English as a second language in Bali, and doing fairly well. And she didn't say anything about anything having happened. Any more stories. We didn't get a great deal of time to talk. It was a family wedding, and I had things to do. And she was there more as unfortunately, she doesn't have a relationship with any of the boys. She was there more just as a guest, and that was not included with all of us as family. But I did make a point to go see her and talk to her, and and keep in touch with her. Suddenly, it was a tough time for her. Her son getting married, got really completely included as a family member because of what for leaving the family. So I don't know. My youngest son has minimal contact with her, just through text on occasion. So I might ask him if he will ask her. But the funny thing is, my son, my youngest, the one that I raised, he still doesn't remember, or he talks about having a friend in that room. Now, I mean, it could be him hearing the stories that, as the family has told the stories over the years in front of him. But, when he knew I was going to be on this, talking to you, he said, well, you're going to talk about that little boy that I had as a friend in the house out in Middleville? And I said, well, I'm certainly going to bring it's a big element or a part of the whole journey we went through. So I don't know if he recalls it because he was very young, but he talks about it.
Yeah, it's quite the invasion, though, you had going on there. You actually had quite a bit of activity. And again, if anybody's heard of this whole Lion's Roar thing, please get in touch. I'm sure that myself and Brian would like to hear if anybody else hearing that amidst some paranormal activity. Well, do you have any activity now at all, Brian?
We haven't had anything, Shannon. And there was a time, and I just remember this because I put it on Facebook, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I put their banner. And because my mom and my nieces and my sisters all really, they glommed onto that. And I put things on there, but I don't remember what happened. I don't remember there was a little incident that happened that I recall, that I know happened, but it was really minor. Because for 11 years I lived right in a neighborhood, house to house, right next door to each other in East Grand Rapids. So there was traffic going by. There were kids or dogs just walking, running, biking by all the time. So I remember there was something that happened that made me go, oh, I wonder if this was coming back again. But it never, whatever it was, I don't recall at this point. I don't remember. But what's the interesting part that people ask me all the time, and I don't understand because I don't even watch horror movies in how many years. I don't really like to be scared. It wasn't scary. The only one that was that entire time was that ominous figure, that guy from the base of the stairs. Other than that, nothing ever seemed. You didn't feel eerie walking around the house. It didn't, even at night, I didn't feel like there was a threat. After I was told to walk through the house and yell and scream, and I just kind of faith that that'll work. And it didn't seem like I thought if I ever experienced something like this, I would be out of my mind scared and I would move out instantly. It didn't feel that way. Even the guy, even that was ominous and it seemed ill-intended, it didn't register as, oh my gosh, we have to get out of here. But maybe it's because life goes on and there's just other things you're dealing with at the time, where when you watch a horror movie, you're kind of focused just on the horror aspect of it. And it never seemed really like was scary. The older woman didn't seem scary. Even the Lion's Roar was shocking, but it didn't seem scary. I think it was because at the time I was wrestling with so many issues with marriage and trying to save the family that I think that was almost like, okay, we'll deal with that later. We'll do what we can now. And so I think, but maybe if we were in a happy relationship and the family was healthy and we were moving forward, we had more energy to focus on that. It might have been a feeling of maybe it might have felt a lot more threatened family. So I don't think it didn't register to me as a threat other than that one incident Friday night with the older man or the bigger man.
Well, and each incident was very different from one another. And each one was almost a one-off, except for the fact that, each one was a one-off because it occurred in different places and everything. But the kitchen drawers and cupboards being open, some of them, and then the Durango doors being open, I guess you could kind of say that's the same thing, but it's not really, but it's just, no. You had the actual physical touch in the shower at the first place that you mentioned at the condo. And then the next thing you know, you're actually having your son say he sees things, and then you're seeing things. So each one is very different from the other.
When I tell these stories, I either get an eye roll or I get people fully engaged. Like, all that happened? Like, it all happened. I mean, I was with my daughter last night. I was there visiting my grandson. My son-in-law was sick, and I said, "Hey, I'm not trying to give you my opinion. This is a fact. This is what I saw." I said, "This is exactly what we experienced." I said, "I'm from it as a atheist class agnostic at best, who believed there was nothing after we passed away. We just rot in the ground and life goes on without us." And so I wasn't coming at this with any spiritual background or desire to see things or looking for things. Accept it or you deny it. And if you accept it, you have to accept that there's something out there that I can't explain. And that's where it really kind of brought me back to being very much more spiritual person. So I had to accept the reality that there's something out there that with my rational mind could not wrap its hand around.
So I guess really, if you look at the bigger picture of things, these were positive for you because it actually made you feel like there is something after we go.
Yeah, it did. There was one thing the therapist, so the therapist we were seeing, which I don't think this is actually the way that worked. I actually saw her after the divorce. She was my counselor for a little bit. The divorce. And Brian, there's a part of me that wonders if some of those entities, other than the one you saw, the man, were there to protect you or your son. Were there kind of, they knew that there was a lot of negative energy here, and they came to protect you. So some of those incidents might have been made for that. So that's another element that I really haven't really comprehended over the years. I haven't really thought about. But I remember her telling me that there's a potentiality for that, where the one was definitely, there's no doubt that was a spirit or a dark spirit. The rest, like I said, they weren't scary. They were just they were just there.
Yeah.
And so whatever that means, I mean, he thought that could be potential.
Well, Brian, I thank you very much for coming on. Did we miss anything, or was there something I should have asked you that I didn't?
Oh, I mean, I think you covered everything. I mean, I wish I could have thought of if there were more, but those are the ones that have in my head the most, Shannon, and they've solidified pretty well in my memory. So I think that those are them.
That would have been solidified in my memory as well. That is for sure.
It definitely it has made an impact on our lives to some degree, but at the same time, now it's just one of those stories you tell, like, the time you got into a car accident or the time you fell in love for the first time. They're just part of the story of our family now.
Right.
And when I listen to your podcast, I try to listen to it a lot when I go to bed and listen to I don't listen to any of the ghost podcasts. Not really interested. I listen to a lot of your Facebook stuff. So I find that fascinating. And I thought, I wonder if you'd be interested in some of the stories that we've experienced. So I thought I'd reach out to you.
Well, no, they're very interesting, especially because I can relate to the whole one-off thing. I've got my shadow person experience and never seen them since, so those one-offs are always like, why did you guys show yourselves just the one time? It's so very strange. It's different when you have we talk about active versus residual hauntings. Well, it's like a loop just playing over and over. So one would expect to see this entity or that creature, heaven forbid, but we've heard of those, showing themselves more than once. But the one-offs are just really pretty dang interesting. I can very much relate to that.
Yeah, it's they all flipped around for a year and a half period of our lives, and then off they went, and we haven't seen them since. So I'm not seeing them again. That means things are probably, and when I look at it, like things are going well if we're not seeing these entities or these experiences.
That's true, especially if you go off of the whole they might be protecting you, and it sounded like they were, maybe the little boy was there to keep Dawson a little bit protected from, maybe his own mom, just from the darkness that she was kind of carrying around with her.
That's very possible. I mean, he'd love to hear that. I think that's something he'd be very interested. He likes me to tell the stories when we're in, with friends or family. Dad, can you tell those stories of our experiences again?
Well, that's cool.
After a while, I get bored with them. I'm like, okay, it's just I'm just saying the same words over and over. I mean,
Right.
they're so memorized, and the memories are very fresh, which is interesting. It doesn't seem to happen 20 years ago. They just imprinted, and they're there. And I would really like to go, Shannon, to sit down with my ex-wife at some point and go through those again, like we did the last time, the only time we've seen each other, and kind of hear her story. The things that maybe I had forgotten, that she remembers, because she was sharing a couple of things that I don't remember that happening at all. But I didn't write them down or anything, and I thought, and I don't recall what they were, and I wouldn't have shared them today anyway, because they were my experiences or my memories.
No, well, thank you so much.
You are welcome.